Are we ready for some more myths and misconceptions? Say that 10 times fast. You can say misconceptions. I think misconceptions is more appropriate, even though it really isn't a word. But I thought we should address the subject of quenching. When do you quench? Why do you quench? What do you quench in? This is something that lots and lots of comments from people that clearly don't really grasp the concept. I'm going to assume most of you that aren't blacksmiths, you don't know much about metallurgy, but how are you going to learn if we don't talk about it? The first thing is there seems to be an assumption out there that everything you make in a blacksmith shop needs to be brought up to heat, needs to be quenched. Now, I don't know if that's because people think everything is made out of a hardenable steel and everything needs to be hardened, which the truth is not everything needs to be hardened. And for most blacksmithing, hardening things would not be desirable in the first place. A gate, a hinge, things like that don't need to be hard. Hardened material is also a little bit more brittle and more easy to break. So you actually want softer material for most ornamental ironwork and most functional projects that come out of a blacksmith shop. Now, if you're a blade maker or a tool maker, you're making hammers, axes, knives, swords, scissors, chisels, all that kind of stuff, those things need to be hardened. They need to be tempered. And that's what quenching is really used the most because it is part of the heat treating process. Now, with that said, there are times that you quench non-hardenable steels. A lot of times if you're doing a twist or something and it's twisting too much in one spot because it's too hot, not enough in another spot because it's too cold, you might quench the spot that's too hot so you can finish twisting the part that isn't quite so hot. Or perhaps you just need to hold on to an end of a piece and it's starting to get hot because you've been in and out of the fire a half dozen times. So you quench the end you're holding on to, or you quench the tongs that you're using to work with, which is one reason I don't make my tongs out of tool steels. I make them out of mild steel. So if they get red hot, I can still quench them, go back to work, and I don't have to worry about breaking the jaws off my tongs. But anyways, in non-hardenable steels, it doesn't hurt to quench your material if you just need to cool it off for better working. Doing that in hardenable materials, bad idea, because then it can become brittle and you can break it while you're doing subsequent tasks on it, and you need to save the quenching for the hardening process. The next misconception in quenching comes from probably a TV show that's been pretty popular. Everybody thinks you have to quench in oil. If you quench in anything but oil, you've ruined your material, it's going to crack, it's going to warp. Absolute garbage, not going to work. Well, that isn't true. Now, every steel has a different quenching medium that it is quenched in. Some of the higher tech steels are air cooling, things like H13, S7. You bring it out at critical temperature, you let it air cool, and then it's hardened. So quenching that kind of a steel in oil could crack it. That could be a real problem. You're going to get it too hard quenching in oil or water. So air cooling, so you need to know what you're working with and cool air cooling steels in air. Then there are oil cooling steels, and there are lots and lots of steels that cool in oil. 01, 5160, 4140. A lot of the more common steels people work with are oil hardening steels. Of course, there are also water hardening steels. W1 is a water hardening steel. The W stands for water, and that is designed to quench in water. There's a product out there that I'm using more and more for making tools out of, referred to as Flutagon or Atlantic 33. That is a water hardening steel that is not only water hardening, but it is also a non-tempering steel. You water harden it, you go to work with it, you don't have to temper it after you harden it. So that's something that if you want the best results from it, you quench it in water. If you quench it in oil, you're not going to get the best results. Then there's still other steels that require quenching in brine, which is a very dense salt water, and that's the fastest of the more conventional quenching mediums. There aren't a lot of steels that need to be quenched in brine, but that is a much faster quench even than water. And if the steel you have quenches in brine, that's the medium you ought to be using for that steel. Now, how do you know what to quench in? Well, it helps if you know what steel you have. If you buy from a manufacturer, you buy a 1, you can look up online, look up in a lot of the different blacksmithing books, you can buy books on metallurgy. I have an app called the Heat Treater's Guide Companion that tells you a lot of this information, although somebody told me that that was no longer available in the App Store, so maybe you can get it, maybe you can't. The books or the information you can find online will tell you not only how hot the steel should be, but also tell you whether it's air hardening, oil hardening, water hardening, brine, whatever situation it requires to quench that steel. If you can look it up, you're going to be better off. Otherwise, you need to do test pieces. Try quenching a little bit in air. Did it get hard? If not, heat it up again, quench it in oil. Did it get hard? If not, heat it up again, quench it in water. If it didn't get hard then, it may not harden at all, but you could try brine. And then you just have to kind of fine tune that, figure out what the temperature is, all of that kind of stuff. It's a big process with unknown steels, which is one reason in most cases I prefer to use known steels. I know what they are, I know what the properties are, and I can heat treat them according to the manufacturer's recommendation. There's a lot of science that goes into hardening and tempering, and knowing how hot it needs to be and what medium to quench in will go a long way towards guaranteeing success for your projects that require quenching.